Hello. I want to make a short video about knees, and in particular low thrusting knees for self-defense. I've always thought, or at least for quite some time, that elbows and knees are one of your best choices in self-defense for a couple of reasons. One is that even if you're experienced and you are well conditioned in the fury, the chaos of a combat situation, you might connect incorrectly with your feet or with your fist and damage yourself. It's less likely with an elbow or a knee. And most people, even if it was only at school, have been punched at some time in their life, but fewer people have been hit with an elbow or a knee, and they're less likely to expect it, less likely to be ready for it. And I'd just like to have a brief discussion of some of the advantages of using a low knee in particular. Here goes. As a lot of my friends will know, I have a terrible habit of making videos far longer than they have to be. I'm going to try to remedy that and start making some shorter videos that just have tips and ideas about training in martial arts. I'm going to use a timer to help me stick to that. 7 minutes. Recently, a combat sport veteran, even hero, made a video about knees and some things that people forget, some things that people do wrong. And I sat down to watch it, and I really thought he was going to say something that he didn't say. He's not just far more experienced than me, he is one of the best. He's one of the people I respect most in martial arts. So I'm certainly not trying to contradict him. I think he's talking from the point of view of somebody with his agility, his strength and his skill, and also always partly with a mind to fighting people who are quite experienced. There's two things that are likely to happen if a fight starts. Actually, that's rubbish, there's lots of things, but there are two primary categories of a kind of fight you might see, and you can see this on the street. You've probably seen it happen if you've been out enough. You get people who realise that something's happening and they take a stance of some sort or another, and you think this person knows that they're in a fight. They might be a little bit experienced, they know that they're going to be moving, reacting, and they have some idea of what to do. Doesn't mean they're the most dangerous. Then you get the maniac who's just going to charge in, grab things, start tearing them aside, start pushing at people, grab any part of your body. This can apply, this kind of a defence, in both cases. I think the kind of knee that the person in question was talking about, I'm not going to mention who it was, you may well know. I'm not going to mention because it just begs for people to start saying, oh, this man thinks he knows better than him. Well, I certainly don't, but I think I've got a different point of view on the matter. Now, he's essentially talking about a knee that's going to go a little bit high and probably to the body, and I think it requires a certain position. It requires people to be engaged in combat in a way that they're standing off a bit, they're watching, see what happens, trying to get an opening. Whereas if you've got a maniac charging at you, that won't happen. And I think if you have got a maniac charging at you, a low thrusting knee is going to be of more advantage to you, more likely to hit. Of course, if you've got somebody who's experienced, who is standing well and evading, then a thrusting knee might be less effective because they might be more ready to move off centre. Not going to happen if somebody's charging at you. Everything the person in question talked about was correct, as though I have any position to criticise him anyway, but I really thought he was going to mention this other kind of knee, and he didn't. And it's just when you go completely at 90 degrees, and the person was talking about contacting with a 90-degree angle. I think the premise was that a lot of people might contact like this to the side, and he's talking about people training like that in sparring. I think that was a bit of an error there. I think he meant training with a bag and things like that. I don't know, but if you're going to do a lot of that in sparring, you're probably going to damage yourself. I try not to do that. When I'm just training for fitness, I'll use these tyres here, and I don't want the microphone to fall off, but I'll be jogging back and forth and doing the knees, and I think that's good for fitness. It's pretty hard to do. I wouldn't really want to knee somebody like that, even though I do contact in a forward motion then. I think the knee, which although he was talking about 90 degree angle, but he wasn't really using one, it's more like 45 doing this. And I think he means you've got to move into the target and not swipe at the target from the side. Quite correct. I really think though, if you're going to use a knee for self-defense, particularly if it's somebody who may not be expecting it, then you're best putting everything into it. Some people know the figures specifically, I don't. Some people misquote them. I won't do that. I won't even use them. It's known that when you move your leg above a certain point, you're using a certain amount of your force, of your strength to raise it, and it gets quite high rather than just putting the force in. And you can see this clearly enough if I just try to knee this quite high. Well, one, I'm going in the wrong direction to really push it. Different if you've got somebody's head or somebody's bent over. If you've got somebody in a clinch, then it's a perfect thing to do, but you may not be in that situation. This assumes that somebody's going to attack you, you're facing somebody who's about to try to hurt you, and you just very quickly, hopefully without looking down, just very quickly drive a straight knee forward, and that's going to make it more difficult for them to walk. Probably not going to want to pursue you very much. It might make them think twice about doing anything violent in the first place. We can have a look also. This person was a very experienced combat sport professional, very flexible. Now let's look, if I'm trying to get into somebody's body, this is a little bit high of course, but by the time I'm up there, there's not a lot of force in that. Let's change this a little bit by reconfiguring the bungees. Still, it's a little bit high. I'm thinking of this as your target. This is where you're really going to stop people from wanting to move around very much, and there's not so much muscle here as there is lower down, so I think it's the ideal spot. It's more difficult to move the higher part of the leg, the thigh, off centre than it is the lower part. And here, that's already better. Let's take a little bit lower, still above the thigh, but that will do. And now you're thrusting right into it, and almost all the energy you're using is going to do damage rather than being spent getting your leg into a position before it's going to contact. And you can, I think I did it already, but you can easily see. Let's do it properly as they were suggesting, nice open foot. That's not bad. That's going to hurt somebody, but I simply think that's going to hurt somebody a lot more. That's my opinion anyway. You can let me know if you think otherwise. Let me know if you've got any comments to make about it. I think a low thrusting knee is one of the most useful things, one of the tools that should be at the front of your box if you might get into a combat situation. And that's really it. 39 seconds to go. It's a miracle. I want to make some more short videos like this. I often have ideas for little things I'm doing when I'm using the bag and the ball, or just sitting around of an evening, and I ought to try to fit more of those things into short videos rather than making long ones that take a long time to edit. And people hopefully are more likely to watch this. Don't expect you to necessarily agree with me, but if you disagree, I hope you will explain yourself. At one point when I made a video talking about elbows and knees, you always get idiots making comments on YouTube. That said, I also have people make comments that sometimes bring a slight lump to the throat, because there's some really nice things people say. And I'd like to say I've made a few friends via YouTube videos, also including people who make their own videos. This person said your technique's shit. Well, we're talking about a couple of elbows, advancing footwork, and then a knee. People have been using those for a very long time, very successfully. So if you want to say something about the way I was employing them is bad, I'd love to hear it. But you've got to say more than just it's shit. You've got to explain something. I'd like to hear things like that. Just try to be informative, I suppose, rather than too brief. Right, that's it. It's probably still less than 8 minutes. I'll get there and be more concise sooner or later. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Cheers.